So here I was at the end of this block, and after learning a bunch about fate and virtue, I wanted to further my questioning. And so to do that, I asked myself something that had importance to me. And so this question was, what really is honor? And to look at honor, what I decided to do is see its applicability in ancient Greece. Because in ancient Greece, it had a lot of importance. Honor was part of everyday life, and it was part of the social compact of the time. And so I had to find a way to articulate clearly the concept of honor in Greek society, even though it was such a major part of it. So to start doing this, I looked at Kleos. Kleos is really important because it was the amount of recognition and fame an individual had through his reputation. So it all depended on how people saw you in society. If you were doing a bunch of great deeds and if you were fighting for the glory of a king, you had a higher Kleos and therefore people liked you more. And to attain this really high level of Kleos and for people to love you, you had to do these deeds or acts of glory. And these acts were really what defined your importance and your honor. Honor was directly linked to the amount of deeds one individual made. But then I had to think, because I wanted to find the best way in which I could talk about Kleos and show its importance in Greek society. And I thought that the best way to do that was thinking, what about Greek literature? Where in Greek literature can I find honor? And where does it speak about the importance of honor?
And so I knew that I had to look at the biggest piece of Greek literature, which is the Iliad. And so the Iliad can tell us a lot about the culture of the Greek society. And it can also tell us, because since it shaped behavior at the time and it shaped the way people were at the time, it can tell us a lot also about who the Greeks were at the time. The Iliad had such a big place in Greek society that it was even part of the education of the time. And so people would read their children the Iliad to show some of the ethical behavior they had to follow, or some of the values that they had to uphold, or some of the principles that they had to entertain in order to be a good citizen of the Greek society. Knowing that the Iliad was such a big part of the Athenian education, but also of the Greek psyche of the time, and also knowing that the Iliad held a lot of importance to honor, I think that before looking at some of the characters in the Iliad, we must look at what the philosophers taught about the place of honor and the importance that it held in the daily lives of Greek citizens. This will give us a better perspective into the actions of the different characters in the Iliad. We know that Aristotle believed that the best way to reach a good ethical behavior was through actions. But what did he think about honor? Well, if we think about it, honor is gained through virtuous actions, and virtue is done through action. But virtue is also following social codes, but it's mainly about skills and abilities. So I think we can say that, therefore, honor is gained through being skillful at what is idolized in the social code. For example, many of the characters in the Iliad are really honorable because they represent this aspect in which they are the most representative of the social code of the time, and that makes them honorable. Hector proves that he is really honorable through his actions. He decides not to run from the war, but instead to fight, even if he knows that he will probably lose. And even when his wife tells him to back away from the war, he tells her that he cannot because his honor will be put in doubt if he does. And he doesn't want to be remembered as a coward. And when he dies, he is remembered as an honorable soldier. And that makes his life accomplished. And this is what warriors at the time would aim for. They would never back down from fights because it would mean that their kleos and their reputation would be lowered. and that would be negative for their influence and for their ability to lead other people. When we look at Hector, we can see the correlation between militarism and honor. It was important for men at the time to fight in order to prove their own honor. If they did not accomplish glory, or if they did not do deeds of war, they could not attain this honor. And so it is very important to notice this link between militarism and honor in Greek society. When looking at the concept of honor in the Iliad, it is also really important to look at Achilles, since he is the prime example of the hero archetype. Even if he does not seem to be an ethical individual at first, he becomes honorable when he decides to go to war, when his friend Patroclus dies. And so it does not matter, his actions beforehand do not matter, as long as he proves himself in the war and fights for the social code. Achilles' honor is also his prime motivation, since he fights only in the war, only to be remembered forever. This was his way to become immortal. Since he was only half mortal and half immortal, he could not survive forever. And so the way for his legacy to continue was through having a really high kleos, or having a really high honor. And he did that by fighting in the Trojan War. To finish our triumvirate of Iliad characters, we can look at Agamemnon. Agamemnon was also a really honorable character, since he was a leader of his people, and also because he was humbled in his leadership. He always followed the counsel of his subordinates, and always tried to amass as much honor as possible for himself through war and through his deeds. However, the character of Agamemnon does not seem to be the most ethical. When he receives a gift of war, which was a girl named Chryseis, he does not want to give her back, even when the gods and his subordinate counsel him to. This causes great pain for the Trojan soldiers, and there was a lot of people who died. Agamemnon could have stopped many people from dying if he would have only given his prize back. And so this leads me to question his ethical behavior. We can see by this example that the honor of these great men were not based on virtue as a sense of an ethical code. However, it was more based on the ability and the aptitude of war, and of the ability to show humility and to show leadership in cases of war. The system of honor in the Greek society is also really interesting, because even though there were no set ethical codes, it is a system that is self-regulating. When a character would try to gain honor by shaming his adversary for no reason, this would be considered hubris. And hubris was an offense in the ideology of the Greek society. This hubris was a breaking of the social compact of the time and represented a public shaming for the person who would shame his adversary for no reason. A man who showed hubris would not be looked well, and his kleos would therefore be lowered. And so his reputation would not be as high. And I find this really interesting, because it kept some soldiers or some really important men from being too self-centered, because they had to keep in mind the kleos of other people in order to maintain their own kleos. And this was some sort of social interaction that was really important and really complex, and maintain some form of ethical code. If we want to look at honor from a different perspective that is not fiction, we can look at Thucydides' discourse on Pericles. He said that Pericles was a really honorable man and a really virtuous man because of his ability to lead people and because of his strength in maintaining political stability and in matters of warfare. Again, this does not show him being virtuous or honorable because of his righteousness or because he is a good person, but because of his ability and because of his skills and his ability to do those skills really well in a political context. And so, after looking at honor in ancient Greece, I have to ask myself, well, what is honor today? And why did it become the way it is today? And has it changed from the way it was in ancient Greece? Well, when looking at the concept of honor today, I noticed something really important. I noticed that there was a shift from honor being something really public, something that depends on your reputation, depends on your kleos, to something that is a lot more private, that depends on your personal achievements, that also depends on your individual perspective of your ethical behavior and the way in which you succeed at managing your personal accomplishments and yourself whilst maintaining the different social codes that are a part of everyday life. The biggest difference I noticed was that honor today doesn't seem to be related as much with your ability and your skills, but more on the amount of good you can do and more on your personal accomplishments. And so there was this shift from honor being a big part of kleos to being something that is more ethical. If you follow the ethical codes, you will be an honorable person. Even if it is hard to say what may have caused this shift, it is possible for us to speculate. For example, there is a possibility that one of the big causes would have been the implementation of the ethical codes of Christianity. Even though there were ethical codes in ancient Greece, they were not as much of as much importance as the ones that were introduced by Christianity. If you did not follow the ethical code of Christianity, you would go to hell. And so this may have caused a change in behavior from soldiers to become a bit more focused on ethical justice. A good example of this are the knights in medieval history. They followed honor codes that depended on them being righteous and serving the God and the social code that were implemented by Christianity at the time. So we can see that there was this big shift from the concept of honor in ancient Greece to today. But I think it would be a mistake to say that it has completely changed. We can still see in the world that there are some cultures where honor is really important and holds a really prevalent place that is kept in place by kleos. For example, the US military holds a great importance to militarism and the deeds that one accomplishes through their behavior in war. In this case, we can see that kleos still holds a really important place since one can only achieve glory by doing deeds of warfare. If we follow this line of thinking, we can deduce that the US military is probably closer to ancient Greece than maybe the rest of the world is. I also think that the shift from a more public to a more private sense of honor is based in Western civilization is based on this sense of individualism that is very highly regarded and valued in our society. And so to take a closer look at the correlation between the sense of individualism and the new concept of honor, I asked 8 different people the question, what do you find honorable about your life? Or where does honor lie in your identity? Their answers really, in my opinion, supported this sense in which it was more about personal accomplishments than what other people were thinking about you or your reputation among your peers.
For me, honor is all about self-esteem and accomplishments. So personally for me, what's honorable in my life would be my academic achievements and all the hard work I put in to be accepted in the university I wanted to be in, and for that I am proud and I find that is honorable.
The honor that exists in my life, I think, is mostly for my parents. I find that it's honorable that my dad gave up a high-paying job and a very successful career in a high level of science to work for his dream and make wine and start a winery with my mom. And I find my mom honorable because she went back to school to become an artist instead of focusing on something that's might be more financially supportive.
I find there's honor in getting early acceptance to university with honors.
I think it's honorable that I had so much support throughout my life from my parents, because so much shit could have gone down between them, and they stayed strong for such a long time and were able to keep our family together.
I find honor in my ability to skillfully practice my hobbies. For example, I love to knit.
The more things I do in life, the more honor I feel.
I find honor in making other people happy.
I find honor in making other people's lives better.